back to Reclaiming America. Let me bring the old guy on. Here he is. There's Bill. I'm Dan. And
we're going to share the facts of life with you in a sensible way so you can understand the stupidity going on out there. That, the only problem with that, when you tell them that they can't be that dumb, they take it as a personal challenge and they try to go lower.
I was going to say, this past week, they've taken stupidity to the lowest level I think I've ever seen. And there's so many ways I can prove that. But let's start with a good one, if you don't mind. One I'm excited to talk about. Russiagate. Remember that?
Yeah, did none of it?
No, Bill. They have evidence.
Yeah, and I'm not even going to say it because we're banned.
Yeah, you'll get, and that's the thing, right? That's a really good point. Back, 3 years ago when it first started, I think it was 2019, right? Is that when they started doing that? If you spoke out and said, wait a minute, can we see some evidence, blah, 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 you could get banned for spreading misinformation. Meanwhile, you've got, people like, I don't know, Adam Schiff going on national TV stating, I have evidence.
So there's clear evidence on the issue of collusion, and this adds to that body of evidence.
He was the head of the committee doing the, that wasn't an indictment, I don't think. Was it? No, I'm sorry, an impeachment. That wasn't one of them.
But he was involved in that. But
he was involved in
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And to hear, now that basically election interference, let's throw another conspiracy out there, it was kind of taking place because I mean, I have not read the actual report, but I saw, I don't know, half dozen newscasts about it and a few other things. I actually think they talk about January 6th being an insurrection. This was, for lack of a better term, a soft coup.
This was an attempt at a bloodless coup.
Yeah, it really was. And think what you will about January 6th. This was far worse. Far, far worse, because they effectively dismantled a presidency at the time.
And it's always worse when people in power are trying to implement it rather than people coming from the base or the grassroots, if you want to call it. They have their own reasons. And we already talked about the fact that there were things that happened on January 6th that shouldn't have, and they should be held accountable. Right. But it was nowhere near the level of this crime that the Durham report came out and called out to be total fantasy.
And the sad part is there, from what I can see and what I've heard, there's no criminal charges going to be planned for all the people.
They made no recommendations even to redo the FBI. And that's a shame. If you're going to fix things, fix it, because if you leave it the way it is, it just further undermines trust in government.
Well, very good point there. And to take it a step further, what's to stop the next person from doing it, right? What's to stop, say, the current administration from doing it to whoever the candidate becomes from the Republican Party, generating this fictitious thing? I mean, basically the way that whole thing worked was somebody, this is how they get around it, somebody created this rumor, then the FBI gets involved, the FBI gives it to the media just runs with it, and then that becomes the evidence back to the FBI. Then Congress gets involved, starts doing an investigation, has a whole committee on it. You've got Schiff out there, doing his thing. And meanwhile, it was all complete and utter BS. There was literally nothing.
The worst part of it, which is also a further indictment of the leadership there, it's been proven by that report that the Obama leadership, including Biden, knew about this before it happened. They were warned by the CIA director that this was going to occur coming out of Hillary's campaign, and it was going to be pure bull. Yet they did it, and they let it run, and they used it to the best of their abilities.
And anyone who thinks that doesn't have an effect on the 2020 election is nuts. All right. Huge effect? I don't know. But if you swing 2-3 percentage points, Trump's president, Biden's not. Between that and the Hunter Biden story, which, again, another example of an absolutely true story in this case that was claimed to be false. And the CIA was involved in that. You know, you had 51 guys signing this letter, which complete BS again. It's scary to me, Bill, that we've reached a point now where we're literally seeing how they are manipulating things.
Yeah, but you know what we're not thinking about, and we're assuming that they want things to get better or to control. If you remember the globalist operation, they're looking for this country to collapse. And anything they can do to undermine the government, to cause the people to turn around and scream for change and change this government to something different, they're going to do. So are they ever going to correct these people? Hell no.
No.
What they're going to do is they're going to try and replicate it to the point where everybody has their own, quote, revolution, and they take over and we become a communist country, because that's the only way we're heading.
You know, well, let me ask you this, because I'm interested to see what the House is going to do now with this information, because the House is the one who ran the investigation. Schiff was the leader of it, right? First thing I would do if I'm McCarthy is censure Schiff. Take him off all committees, censure him. That's what they did to Marjorie Taylor Greene, basically just because they didn't like her. Here we have actual evidence he was lying.
Well, it is interesting because I heard on the radio when I was driving around this afternoon that he's actually saying that Schiff does not deserve to be in Congress. So that may be leading somewhere.
I agree with that, but at least take that first step and censure him.
Well, that may be the beginning of what they're going to do. You know, if he doesn't belong there, they may have a procedure to go after him. And I'm hoping that they do that, though. We all have to agree that McCarthy's done a great job so far at sitting there. And people were worried about him, and they were concerned he wasn't going to be tough enough. The man has been a steel girder dealing with these people, and he has not moved an inch. And he's got a lot of fronts between the deficit budget issues, between going on trying to figure out how they're going to override and stop this Biden spending. It's just unbelievable.
But the curtain's been peeled back on Oz, right? We're seeing the wizard manipulating things behind the scenes now. I mean, it is blatantly obvious. And to your point earlier with, people's confidence in the government has been eroded. I mean, the last numbers I saw, people, positive viewpoint of Congress is like less than, I think it's single digits at this point, less than 10, 12%. And it's going to get worse. I just think that if we're going to come back from this, because we are at the precipice right now, like you're saying, right? The end of the country. I really believe that. I have no faith whatsoever in the government anymore. I knew this whole Russiagate thing was BS from the beginning, but I didn't know the level to which it was being done. If you can't trust the FBI and the Department of Justice, you can't. Congress is Congress, right? But if you can't trust that, the rule of law no longer applies.
Well, unfortunately, the blind misjustice has got a cement on one side.
Yeah. But if we can't trust that those people, FBI, Department of Justice, the courts, they're the last thing standing between us and either anarchy or, like you said earlier, socialism, whatever. Because Congress, they're all power hungry. They're going to do whatever they got to, right? I was appalled. I knew it was fake. Don't get me wrong. But I was appalled to hear how deep it was. The deep state is deeper, as Trump talked about, is deeper than I think even I could have even fathomed. What do you think?
I want you to take it a step further. Should we be lucky enough to get Trump back in the White House, could you see the deep state cleaning that's going to happen? That man will be coming in with Hoover vacuum cleaners in every place, and they're gone. And he won't even be the one that the HEPA is just going to get rid of him.
But do you think he'll get the support? Because he tried to do that before, and both sides shut him down.
But the first time he was out there, he was learning the job.
Fair point.
And then halfway through learning the job, he got hit with COVID. And then he was on for him, he was offensive defensive. He was offensive being defensive. And he really didn't get a chance to do what he wanted. Plus, frankly, he made some bad decisions on who he put in charge of places.
Well, that was a point I was just thinking of myself is
on his own, or whether someone grabbed him and said, you need to do this politically. I don't know. But I think he's a lot smarter now. And, I will tell you one thing about Trump. Again, and I've said this, I grew up watching Trump down in New York, and the man will never stop to clear his name and get his honor back. And it doesn't matter what it cost him. And he's also somewhat vengeful.
No.
That's
no.
a lot being somewhat vengeful.
You think he carries a chip on his shoulder?
I think he has a whole cord of wood there and just try to knock it down.
Yeah. Well, that's, but again, he's going to need help, right? So let's say hypothetically he gets the presidency in 24. Honestly, I think things need to happen before that. Like I said, I think starting with Schiff. But be that as it may, Trump wins the election. He gets in January of 25. Starts cleaning house. He's got to. He can't
hold the House and they add the Senate. Life becomes good because you currently have the House. You currently have the Supreme Court.
Well, I think he's got to. It's not just that. His cabinet, right? He's got to not bring old school political animals. I'll use in. He's got to get clean slate. Like what he is. He's a businessman. So, all right, whoever he decides for SecDef or Secretary of State, stop going to, Bush, Obama, Xers, because that's basically what his cabinet was, political lifers. Let's get some fresh blood in there, people that he can then trust, because you can't trust the establishment right now. It's got to be a total cleaning.
The problem you're going to have to do that, which makes it very difficult, he's got to find business people with enough savvy so they're not going to get nailed as they go in there and get snowed by these deep staters. Because, the learning curve is the problem.
True.
If you go in there knowing enough to be dangerous, which means they've had some experience with government, and maybe they were thrown out. Maybe there were people who, whistleblowers, if you want, that were put out that are now willing to go back and do some work and clean up because they have the base knowledge to go with them, and they won't lose the time on the curve of learning what's going on.
It's almost like they have to be Trump themselves, so to speak, right? Trump-like, if you will. He's got to populate people in those positions, especially at the DOJ, more than anywhere else, I think, at this point, to restore credibility.
The second place I would be heading is Secretary of State.
Secretary of State is another one. SecDef also.
Yep.
The big ones, so to speak. But beginning with justice, because, again, my fear with this, and you're already hearing it online, people have completely lost trust in the FBI. They've lost trust in the whole process of the judicial system and everything. You lose that, you lose your society. Plain and simple.
Pick one.
What's that?
Yeah, but did you hear what they did over the whistleblowers in the case with Hunter Biden?
No, I didn't.
They've identified for a whole team of whistleblowers who are doing it. They've been relieved of their job of doing the investigation on Hunter Biden. They're bringing in new people.
So who replaced them? Was it DOJ that did it, or was it?
I think it was IRS.
IRS, okay.
With their own people, they took these people out and just said, we know who you are. You're the whistleblowers. You're gone. We're putting new people in there. So the people who have pointed out the issues that were at least honest are gone, and they're replacing them with their picks. So you know where they're coming from.
And who would have possibly ordered that? The guy being investigated, maybe? His dad?
I'm not sure he's conscious enough to do that.
But again, it speaks to what we're talking about right now. How can you, in good conscience, look at that, see that, and say, yeah, I can trust whatever the results are. You can't.
Now, if I were anybody, I would turn around and take Durham, who's just done a great report, and put him in charge of the Hunter Biden operation. Now, let him do the investigation and bring the charges, because he's got a track record now that says these are the facts, and I don't care who gets hurt by them. These are the facts.
You have to give him credit because he had the balls to say what he just said in the report. I mean, credit where credit's due, because he could have just as easily gone the other way and, massaged it.
Previous president and sitting president.
Yeah.
For their involvement, at least their knowledge of what's going on. That took a lot of guts.
And, you look at that whole thing with Russiagate. The thing I will say is, if at this point, if the left is saying something is happening, they're doing it. I mean, it's been proven that it came out of Hillary's camp originally, right? I mean, it's so.
There's some speculation that the Durham report is making that it was actually Hillary's idea.
Yeah, I saw something on that. Again, I like to see some facts. That's conjecture, and that's okay if they're going to claim it's conjecture. But
well, have the facts for you because they said so.
that's their whole. Well, you look at now MSNBC trying to spin this, because I watched a couple of their reports. Well, they found this, or they didn't find this, but there are parts of it that kind of indicate, and I'm like, you're literally lying. Now, they don't have a huge following, but there's enough people out there that are listening to that and that are going to go, well, see, it proves Trump was guilty. No, he wasn't. You look at the mainstream media, how they're covering it. I don't know if you watched like NBC News. I did. They couldn't have glossed over it any better. I mean, it was like, the problem is, good and bad with this. Part of the problem is there's a series of people, a group of people, that's where they get their main information, the nightly news. Frankly, it's your generation, right? And then there's the younger generation. They're going out on leftist sites like MSNBC, Vice, which cratered, by the way. They're closing, went bankrupt, go woke, go broke. So they're seeing the spin on it. And I encourage...
You heard about CNN. Their new news. They actually fell below Newsmax now.
Oh, yeah. Well, so is Fox, though. Fox shot themselves in the foot, too. They out Bud Lighted Bud Light, I think. But it's just, again, I keep circling back to this whole thing where if we don't start building trust back now, honestly, Bill, I think the 2024 election is a moot point, because nobody's going to believe whoever wins won at this point. There's just, because how they're going to go. They're going to find something else to hammer Trump with. Trump will come back with something else. And we're seeing it's all bullshit. All of it.
Well, the question is going to be, I don't know whether Trump will actually walk away with the nomination yet. I think, there are people now speculating based on these reports and what he did on the other show on CNN that he's a lock for the nomination. I'm not sure about that yet. The trouble is, you're going to have people, let's assume for a minute that DeSantis, who is kind of a Trump with a little more polish, which is not necessarily a bad thing.
No, but it's a good thing.
They're going to go after his family. They're going to he's going to have accusations that 30 years ago he walked into some little girl's bathroom, et cetera, et cetera. And, it's not going to be true, but it doesn't matter. It's like what they did to the Supreme Court justice, like they tried with Trump with this woman again from 30 years ago. It's just, they know the plan works, and at least enough of the people that vote will figure it out, because the uninformed are becoming the misinformed. And as long as they listen to those leftist channels, they're there. Nothing's going to change that.
That's where the next election is going to be decided by those of us in the middle, right? Those of us, as are most elections, by the way. You're going to have 30% are going to vote for whoever the Democrat is. You're going to have roughly 30% that are going to vote for whoever the Republican is. That's done, and it's the remaining 40% that are going to determine the election. And to your point, it's how are they going to be informed? Where are they getting their information? But again, it's so murky at this point. Even sites that I mostly trust, I'm starting to look at them with a jaundiced eye, Bill. I mean, there are certain people that I trust more than others, but even they have their spin, and I see that, right? They're all trying to do one thing, which is get ratings. I understand that. I respect that, actually.
The controversy to get the ratings.
Yeah, that, I mean, if it bleeds, it leads type thing, right? But we're at a point now where we're literally looking at the end of the country if we don't fix this and fix it fast. Because, and I don't know that it is fixable, by the way. This has really upset me hearing this. And again, I knew it was BS. I knew there was crap going on, but this really is hitting home with me because if you, again, I keep saying, if you can't trust law enforcement to do their job, clearly, not only did they not do their job, they are implicit in taking out a president. We always joke about Kennedy and the CIA took him out. Well, more and more speculation is they did. Who knows?
The problem is still what we said before. We're running out of conspiracy theories because
everything's true. I think last week I said we were 49-0. Now we're 50-0. I mean, it's becoming absurd. And you look at that whole investigation occurred in 19 into 20 through the election. You cannot tell me that did not have an effect on the election. How big an effect, I have no idea. But you switch 2-3% of the vote. Same thing with the Hunter Biden laptop. If that information gets out accurately, Trump's president. So they deliberately, knowingly manipulated a presidential election, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree. And the money came, and they're deliberately continuing to do the same issues. And what you need to be also thinking about, though, the third piece of their activity was manipulating the votes actually with all their harvesting, which fortunately we didn't have in North Carolina. But you throw those three things together, and you have a Trump landslide.
Fair point. Well, I don't know if you saw, I've been following the Kari Lake election out in Arizona.
Yeah.
So she lost, supposedly, has been to court. She won another step in her court case. So, again, the media is saying it's all BS. She lost. She's just doing what Trump did with 2020, blah, blah, blah. But yet it gets into the courts and she's progressing. Now, is she going to become governor tomorrow? No, she's not, right? But she's exposing what happened. And mail-in ballots and election harvesting of ballots is prime to her court case. You look at stuff like that, and then you have people going, oh, that's all made up. There's no such thing. Well, you said Russiagate was true, too, and that's been proven false. You said I could list, half a dozen things. Again, it all speaks to, where do we go from here? What do you think? I mean, how do we fix this? I'm fired up,
first,
can you
tell? You mentioned last week, isn't this a perfect example of the term doublespeak?
Yeah.
And those of you who didn't read 1984, read it.
It's become the blueprint, as we said last week. It's not supposed to be.
And how do we fix this? The only way we're going to fix this is to seize control and then do what's necessary to put it back in order and realize that we may not be able to give everything back the way you want it because these people don't play fair. You need to play the rules that are set you in a game. And that's the bottom line. If they're not going to play fair, then maybe they don't have a right to play.
All right, so let's gameplay this out, if you will, just to have a little fun with it. All right, so between now and the next election, we got 2 years, ballpark, year and a half, give or take.
About 18 months, yeah.
So knowing what they've done in the past, and we both know they're going to run that playbook again because, hello, it's worked for 50 years now. Why would they not? What can be done right now with the understanding, and I'm talking at the government level, so we're talking Congress, state legislatures, that type of thing. What can be done to start rebuilding the confidence? Because you've got a split Congress, you've got a president who needs to be investigated, and, oh, by the way, I'm going to replace anyone investigating me. I'm rolling my eyes for those just listening. What do you think is the first step? What would be the first couple steps so that we can get a fair election, one that people believe in?
A couple of things. The first thing we have to do to make it work is we have to get people's confidence back in the ballot. That's number one. They've got to understand that their vote is going to count and that we're minimizing illegal voting because you're never going to wipe it out. I mean, that's just
Yeah, I
reality.
mean, you're never going to get perfect. You're right.
But if you start looking, for example, and I give the RNC credit for what they're doing right now, North Carolina has basically become, it's shortly going to become a red state. I don't care what people say.
I'd postulate it already is, but go ahead.
We haven't got the governorship yet. Give us a little
Yeah.
month.
He's down in the basement, Bill. We've parked him off to the side now. He has no power anymore.
How do we get there is basically because the leader of the RNC, North Carolina GOP, Mike Watley, hired 540 lawyers at election time. And those lawyers were spread out across the state in every area you could want them to. And there was not a ballot counted that there wasn't an RNC attorney watching. And that made a difference. And I give you examples. You go back to 2020 with Newby. Newby won by 406 votes, I think, across the entire state to become the Chief Justice. Mm-hmm. Durham is normally a place where when they recount, there's a 2 or 3 or 4,000 vote swing. It was 20.
Yeah.
Other places like that are the same. I mean, they were able to sit there and they called them, and I know some of the stuff they used. They would call the Board of Elections and say, "What time are you counting?" And they say, "Why? Because we're going to be there." And they let them go in with nothing. So if they can start doing that, Florida did something very similar to that. I think Tennessee might have also, though I'm not 100% sure on that one. But if we can start getting that done and getting the ballot protected, then people can have faith in voting again. And we have to get out there and then we have to get them to vote. So that's step one. Now, what can the legislators do? They can pass laws to stop the harvesting, to stop some of this stuff that's going on with illegal voting, with absentee voting. They can cut back on the number of days you vote. Again, credit to the North Carolina General Assembly. They're working on a constitutional amendment to cut early voting from 17 days to 7. Now, those are the kind of things that are going to reinstill people voting. Again, another good piece, voter ID is back. So that's a big thing for us also. These things will make a difference and start getting people to at least give it a try again, and hopefully that it's working better. And then hopefully they see the results that they need to see, and their faith is starting to be rebuilt.
But you're talking about North Carolina there. Do you see New York, California doing that? I don't. Right? They're going to go the opposite way.
What you may not be aware is Michael Watley, who's our chair of North Carolina, has been appointed the voter integrity czar, for want of a better term, of the entire country. He is traveling around. He's been in Louisiana. He's been in Oklahoma. He's traveling to all these states. Like Louisiana's got a governor's election off year, and it's a tight one. He's traveling with them to give them the same plans that worked in North Carolina and worked in Florida and other places, so they can implement it in this off year and hopefully make the changes so people start trusting again.
I agree with what you're saying. That's all part of it. I don't think it's enough. My personal opinion. I think
executions are not really on.
special re-education camps. I'm joking. We got to say that we're joking, because there are people. Somebody's going to clip that and say you and I are advocating for it. You know that. I think we need to start using their playbook, but in an honest fashion, right? So again, I've thrown out. You haul Schiff in front. You make an example of him. He flat out lied. They have. It's beyond question at this point. All right. Start there with things like that. Get the head of the FBI in, and not just hearings, but I don't know. Does the Senate have control over nominees? I don't know if it's the House or the Senate for things like the FBI or that.
We'll go through the Senate.
Those are Senate. So you know the Senate's not going to do anything. But the House can still do investigations. Again, we understand they can't make changes, but they can make noise.
And they can make budget changes.
And that's the other way to hit them, right? We have to start doing things like this, because if we keep doing this passive approach, we're just falling further and further and further over the precipice.
The House was hurt by the Senate making that deal before they took over, which basically cut the House out of any budget control till this coming year, which is going to when they start fiscal year October 1st. So, they lost a year of what they could have pulled off. And that was all because the Senate decided to go along with, what's his name? Upchuck Sugar. and let him go through with this kind of garbage. They passed some stuff that they shouldn't have done. And it was a bipartisan pass. It wasn't just the Democrats.
It was.
We had some join them. But, and as I tell people all along, if we're going to make it happen, we have to come together as a group. We have to realize we have a big tent, which means we're not going to agree with everybody all the time. But I will tell you this, and I want you to think of it this way. Even if the guy sitting there only votes 50% of the time the way you want him to, and you can't get him out of there for whatever reason, you can't get a primary out, whatever it is, are you better off with him there or a Democrat who's going to vote you against you 100% of the time? And you need to make some relative decisions and do what you need to do to put people in office. Ideally, put conservatives there that will do what's necessary to make changes. If you can't get there, then you deal the hand you're dealt. So that's the way that plays.
I'm at the point now where it's never going to happen, but turn over everybody at this point. I wouldn't keep anybody in Congress. All 535 of them go. Because there's no confidence in Congress anymore. Like I said earlier, you've got roughly 10% of the people have confidence in Congress. And what do people do? They bitch about it, and then they reelect the same person for life, right? Schumer's been there, 30 whatever years. Pelosi, 40. The turtle, he's been there forever. My concern more than anything else is saving the country at this point, because we've talked about it many times. This has just kind of pushed me even further that way. I just don't see how to recover out of this.
I would tell you that there's two things that would be nice. We'll never get the Congress to do it, but if we work through convention of states, and that's run into some heavy opposition, two things they would need to pass that would change things greatly is, first of all, balanced budget amendment, and secondly, term limits. That would make a difference right off the bat.
And you got a better shot going through the convention of states. Now, last I knew, they were polling different things. I thought they had 35 states they thought could come together and start working on things.
And I think we've got low 20s of people that have already done what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of getting
there. But then
there
was a small group that's there, but it's, they're not going to do it until the rest, they know they can, it's I'm not going to vote for it unless I know it's going to pass type thing.
Well, it's the old thing that you go to some of these conventions and you want to be the one to put the candidate over the top.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to pass your vote, everybody else goes, and then you're the last one there and you can say, I did it.
Yeah.
I made it happen.
That's an interesting point. I think, again, I lean a little more libertarian than you. I think state control needs to be brought back. The federal government's simply too big at this point, too powerful. That was not the intention of the framers of the Constitution. They wanted the power within the states. The only way to get control is for the states to take it back. Whether that'll happen at any point, I don't know.
Something that would make a drastic change, and it's a rechanging an amendment. I would change the one that has direct election of senators and go back the way it used to before 1917. Which meant that
I know what you're talking about. Why don't you tell the audience what that is?
Prior to that, the two senators from every state were appointed by the state legislature.
Right.
So they were actually accountable to the state legislatures and they could change them anytime they needed to. So you had people who were more responsive to state needs versus now, where if you can get elected, first of all, there's two going across the entire state, and it's almost impossible to unseat them. So, the best solution might be to go backwards on this one. And when we took back prohibition, there's no reason we can take back this direct election of senators and go back to the way it would give the states more authority.
And the counter argument with that would be, well, you're taking the power away from the people. Actually, I would say it's the opposite. You're giving the power back to the people because the people are electing their state legislators. So
exactly,
and you have much more control the further down you go, the more local you go, the more power you have with your vote, is my opinion. Now,
I agree with you.
My vote for the presidency, I'm not saying it doesn't count, but is meaningless compared to, you're talking, 150 million votes? My vote for my local state legislator or senator is much more.
Or county legislature.
And I think that's a great suggestion right there. Again, my goal is to try and we've got to get out of this nightmare scenario we're in. And I really, really am concerned that now that this has come out, and I don't think it's going to change anything. I think you're going to see the status quo. I honestly do, Bill. McCarthy, I think he'll blah, blah, blah. But when it comes down to holding hearings, I'll believe it when I see it. And
I think we get the hearings. Well, what I'd like to see coming out of the hearings, and again, it's an exercise in futility at some level.
Oh, but absolutely is. No question.
I would take some of these deep state appointees and impeach them. Mayorkas is example right there. Just bring him in, impeach him, and let him win the battle, because you're not going to win it in the Senate. But you're putting notice on people, and people are seeing that you're trying. And I think that does make a difference in turning people around.
And then the other side of it is it's going to get out on social media, right? So more people will see what's going on. The nightly news, David Brinkley's long gone. Cronkite's long gone. They're not, those people with integrity are gone.
You remember Cronkite? I remember reading about him in my books.
Who, Cronkite? Yeah. He's a little after your time.
Ooh, very much.
You got your original news from Plato. Who you kidding? And Socrates.
It's going to get potential.
But the mainstream media is not going to cover it. In fact, they're going to do everything they can to cover it up. But they've lost their battle. Their influence is waning I would say at this point, by the hour, not even the day anymore.
You know what else makes a difference in a very strange way, and it's an indirect way? I would take some of the laws we have against owning too many businesses and pass something that says you couldn't own more than one media company at whatever level it is. Because therefore, you got some of these billionaires that own a half a dozen, and they don't care if they lose money or not. But if they're being owned by someone that has to make a living out of it, or at least pay his stockholders back that way, they're then going to be a little bit concerned about what attracts people to listen to the show, and they might give some facts out there occasionally.
That's a really good point, because I'll use our local area. The stations, the local NBC station is the same company owns the one in Raleigh, the one in Charlotte, a few other places. And if you actually go and watch the newscasts, so back in the day, newscasters wrote their own scripts, the local news. They still do. But they're getting sent stuff from on high, right? This is the story, run it, and this is what you're going to say. So you're right. It's coming down from on high, and then, it gets played in Wilmington, Raleigh, Charlotte, you name your TV area. And it looks like it's, they're trying to make it look like, see, the entire state of North Carolina thinks this because of this story. No, it's propaganda is really what it is. I'm sorry, I'm going to call it for what it is. But you also see that on the national level, right?
And you also see what you're talking about. You can link up, for example, WECT in the area is also linked with the radio shows. So, because
Also,
they write that goes on the radio. So, if there's something that passes, you can only own one venue, and that's it at any media level. It's going to make things change, and I think that would go a long way to getting a freer press, or at least a more truthful press. Because if you haven't got a billionaire saying, okay, we can shed $10 million a year and I'll just send you a petty cash check. And suddenly you have to make the money to make payroll and make your stockholders really happy. Then you're going to have to go out and start offering people what they need. And, cases in point are CNN and, MSNBC or MSLSD, as they're sometimes called. And,
MSDNC is what I call
and we go back to them, and they don't care how many viewers they have, because there's someone high above that's going to foot the bill, whether they have 200,000 people watching or whether they have 2 million people watching a show. So, but make it so that they need the numbers to get the advertisers and pay their bills. Things change.
them. Well, I'll even throw out Fox, Murdoch. He's in
I would
control
like
of
to
it.
throw it out.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're getting thrown out with the bathwater at this point. Tucker Carlson, whatever you think of him as far as is he a shill and all that, okay. But, the minute he threw out that footage from January 6th, he signed his death warrant with Fox, right? So, Murdoch, whether it's him, the father, or the sons, they got him out. There's been speculation it was part of their agreement with Dominion, the settlement they did. But there's a voice that was silenced. Now, he's moving over to Twitter, which I
And you
actually...
heard,
Go ahead.
no, just speaking on that, I heard Newsmax keeps pushing. Do you want to see Fox? Do you want to see him on Newsmax? And they're doing this poll.
Well,
What do you think?
OAN wants him too, but from what I saw, because I watched him on Twitter, that's where he's going.
If I were Eric Bowling, I would not make any long-term plans to buy a new chair.
But you look at, just kind of speak about journalism a little bit, and I'm not by no means an expert on it, but I've been behind the scenes on it. If you notice, and it's happening even more so at the local level, but even national level all the way down, look at the turnover that's happening. Look at the number of people. I'll use our local stations, for example. Yet another one of the anchors left this weekend. She'd been here 2 years. I'm speculating here. I know nothing, but I also have heard things behind the scenes. What's happening is these kids go to college for journalism. They they have this thing. They want to be journalists. They want to tell the story, tell the truth, be investigative journalists, that type of thing. They get through college, they get their degree, they're fat, dumb, and happy. They go to a station, and then they find out, no, you're not going to report on the truth. You're going to report on what we tell you to. And after, they have contracts. Most contracts for the starters are around 2 years. Sometimes you'll get 3, 4. You're seeing this turnover where the minute their contract's up, they're gone. And they're not going to another station like they used to. They're leaving journalism. That's a very telling thing right there. And I don't think a lot of people realize what's going on with that. You're also seeing a little bit at the national level where, call it, I don't know, wide-eyed thing that they have this dream of doing this job, and then they realize they can't do it, and they're leaving. That tells you how deep the control is of the media, in my opinion. What do you think on that?
I have to agree with you. You can just, however, there's also a certain percentage of them coming out of there that wouldn't know investigative journalism if they walked up.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. The talking heads, there's always those. But I even see it with the anchors. You kind of look at their faces when they're trying to read some of this, because they're reading a teleprompter on a camera. But that script they put in there, or someone has put in there for them. And a lot of times, having sat there and watched them do shows, a lot of times they just read the teleprompter. They don't know what's going to come up, right? They're supposed to scan it and read it, but sometimes things pop up and they start reading, and you could kind of tell sometimes. It's like, what did I just say? And that's why I think a lot of them are leaving. And again, that's a sad situation, because that's who ultimately holds government accountable, is a free press. the people and the press. You know, we can fix the people with the voting changes that you talked about earlier. The press is a whole other ballgame. That ain't going to change anytime soon.
No, and unless we get that change, it's gonna slow down at best, if not stop everything else we want to do. Because even you took social media and the other options out there, too much of that is still left leaning. So we're still not getting the
left leaning. I would go no. It's a way. I mean, you look. They control it, right? So Tucker Carlson said Twitter's the only place left for free speech. I don't disagree with him. Now, a year ago, I would have said he was full of it, but now that Musk owns it, for now, we'll see down the road with this new CEO coming in. I've gotten back on Twitter in the last 6 weeks. I'm very intrigued by what I'm seeing. So they have the algorithms, right? We've talked about this a little bit. That drives what you see. You don't control what you see, they do. To be fair to Twitter, I'm seeing both sides a lot, right? I'm seeing stuff from the left. I'm seeing stuff from the right. And I would say it's roughly equal. Is it exactly equal? Probably not. I'm also seeing a lot from the center. Now, you go over to, say, Facebook. Facebook, left-leaning is not doing it justice. I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? You look at the other ones that are out there. Instagram, politically, you don't see much on there. So, I mean, that's all. But you start looking at the big ones for this, which are Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. As far as that, you got two that are extremely left. And Twitter, I'm going to say, is probably center-ish, center-right, center-left, somewhere in there. I don't know exactly where.
Well, the more center than anything else right now.
Yeah. But at least the information's getting out, right? So, and it was interesting to me to see some of these left-leaning stuff that's out on Twitter to something we've talked about before, which is we're different, but we're not so different. There's a lot of commonality there. The problem is that commonality is being lost in the noise of the two extremes on either side. And it's just will be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
In many cases, and not all of them, but in many cases, we all agree it's the end game. We just don't agree how to get there.
Agreed. But if we don't start talking, or better, more precisely, if we aren't allowed to talk, which is what has happened over the last couple of years, we weren't allowed to have a conversation. Nothing's going to change.
Well, I would think the better term is we got to start listening.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm trying to think. My mind is going on. What's that saying? Speak one time for every 10 times you listen. Something like that. There's an old saying I used to hear, which was basically shut up and listen. But even like some of the other stuff I do, like I have another podcast. I threw out yesterday a question to the opposite side and said, "What do you think?" And all I got in return was talking points. The same bullet points we've all heard for years. No conversation. And I was trying to actually have a conversation. We need to get back to that. And that has to happen. We have to control that, the public. Politicians are never going to do it. Politicians are loving this division because it keeps getting them reelected. Absolutely.
But the other side of that coin that we talked about for fixing things is fixing the education system.
And is it fixable, Bill?
Yes, it is fixable. But I think we're seeing some of it happening now with what we've talked about before, that the biggest mistake that the left made with COVID was letting people see what's going on in the schools when they sent the kids home for 2 years. Now they're paying for that. And I think that's happening in a lot of areas because people are home, they're watching, they're seeing what's going on, and they don't like it. Now, again, we've talked before about the fact when enough people are hurt or upset by it, things are going to change. There's a great number of people who, yes, we have inflation and it's affecting us at some level, but there's a great number of people saying it's an inconvenience. It's not really changing my life any. But when it gets bad enough, or they need a loan, or the taxes or whatever goes so high they can't afford it, then they're going to start reacting. And I think the way they're projecting the next 18 months we could be in a real situation by next summer where people are going to be saying, we got to make some big changes because this is not working.
You're going to see people living on the streets like you've never seen before, the way things are looking.
Yeah. The bottom line to this thing is my wallet, my wallet, my wallet. And that's how people vote. And, talk about what you will, they vote their wallet.
With the whole economic situation being what it is, I mean, we are on a precipice. And that's not me saying it. That's the experts saying it. I mean, I was watching a few things on that this week, and they were talking about specifically housing. Quick side note: this will make you chuckle. So there was one thing I was watching. I think it was on YouTube, where this woman was complaining that her mortgage went up by $800, and she was screaming, "How could the banks do this to me?" So this, that was her spiel. So then this realtor and / banker comes on and goes, the bank didn't raise it. That's your escrow that went up. Taxes, insurance, fees, and all that. Your mortgage doesn't change. You sign a mortgage for 20, 30 years. That number stays the same the whole time. Whatever the bank, you're paying the bank. What's changing is escrow. But you could see this woman has no idea that that's what's causing it. And you look around.
That course I wanted to teach, if you remember, you graduate high school, you're going to take that one course in basic economics or checkbooking and learning how to make a loan and making a budget. That would go a long way to helping people understand where they are.
Well, I mean, I actually looked this up after I saw that. I'm like, I knew mine had gone up. My quotes mortgage payment has gone up over $200 in 5 years. My mortgage amount hasn't changed. The bank's still charging me the same $500, whatever it is per month. But, local government has raised taxes. Thank God the state hasn't. But my insurance has skyrocketed and all that. And I don't have a huge house. And I'm looking at a lot of these kids are, they're buying $500,000 houses with incomes that can barely cover it. $200 more a month to them puts them on the street.
And they've got the issue that they don't guarantee that it's going to be that way next year.
No. And then you look at states like New York. So, where we are in North Carolina, taxes have gone up, but nothing. I mean, mostly at the local level, nothing like what you're seeing in New York. New York is going to collapse in the next 5, maybe at most 10 years. And I mean collapse. Because their budget, they can't even come close to covering it. And they're going to come screaming to the federal government for money. They cannot, they've lost. So I'm friends with a local, well, he's was in the assembly. He's now a state senator. And he's been posting stuff. And he's like, we lost 300,000 people, most of whom were the tax base, right? It's not the poor that are leaving. It's the middle class that's leaving. That's your tax base. So our revenues are shrinking, and yet costs are going up.
And to be fair, they're also bringing in people, illegal aliens at this point to keep their population up, which requires more additional servitude.
Right. They're not earning money for the state. They're not paying taxes, And you're going to see California's in the same boat. I don't know how California survives 2 years the way they're hemorrhaging.
Far behind.
Say that again?
Chicago's not far behind in Illinois. They've got their own issues there. And I would say Portland is probably closing in on that too.
Portland is the poster child for collapse. Seattle will be the second one. This isn't sustainable. And you're going to see, speaking about the economy, you're going to see some horrific stuff, I think, in the next 18, 24 months, because it's going to start snowballing. Forget inflation. The housing crisis alone you look at California now. How many homeless people does California have? You drive around LA. I have friends there, and they've done videos where they just drive down the street, and all you see is tents for miles. San Francisco is a joke.
What they sometimes cover is homeless, because I saw a clip on they're homeless living at the beach. And what they did is they took the road and they pulled their campers over, and they're parking their campers with the image, and they're living there. I don't quite consider that homeless.
It'd be a pretty cool way of life, actually, for me. I would love it, but maybe I'll drive down to our local beach and park. Oh, wait, we can't. We're not allowed to. Um,
Our beaches are public.
yes, but you can't park overnight because the towns don't allow it.
You can, it just won't be there in the morning.
And it'll be a few tickets. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years with all this stuff because as we talk repeatedly about it, the country is fracturing. I don't see how New York survives much longer. California, where are those people going to go? Well, they're going to go to Florida, Texas, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Those are the 4 states.
And something, think of it this way: in a couple of years, when all those blue states come running to the Fed saying, "We want more money, we need more money to survive," and the Republicans control that, do you think these North Carolina and California, and Texas and Florida are going to say, "Sure, we'll give you our hard-earned money because you screwed up"? Ain't happening. They're going to run into
they can get it from the federal government, which right now, who controls the purse strings, right? I mean,
Congress.
House is supposed to, but
well, if they pass, if they stop this discretionary funding, like here's $200 billion, and you decide how it's being spent, they need to earmark every dollar going out so that you can't play with slush funds.
well, we're starting to talk about the budget now, so let's dive into it because that's the other big topic, right? It's like we planned a segue like that, and yet we didn't. Let's dive into the budget a little bit, if you don't mind. So they're talking possible agreement by the end of the week. So I did a little research before we came on. So Biden's budget, and I'm rounding the numbers, he's looking for $7 trillion to spend. They're bringing in, and again, I'm rounding, about $5 trillion.
Yep.
So that's a $2 trillion difference. So, their argument that everyone's seeing is that grandma's not going to get her Social Security check. The Army's not going to get paid. Well, I did a little research on that too. So, and again, I'm rounding. The federal government this fiscal year already has brought in just under $3 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
Social Security, Army, Navy, all of that is a little over $1 trillion. So that money's it's already there. They have that money. There's no reason that Social Security has to be touched. There's no reason the military can't be paid. There's no reason the Forest Service can't fight fires, because I heard that one too. All right. They have the money to do that. What they don't have the money for is, to your point, the slush fund stuff. Right? They're trying to use grandma to get their extra money.
And that's remember the commercials that Republicans push grandma over the cliff.
Yep.
And they were out there forever, and it works. But I think sooner or later people are going to get smart enough to realize I'm not buying that anymore.
Are they?
What scares me in the budget, when you really want to talk things, and people don't realize this, I think we have a 32 or 33 trillion dollar hole right now. We're only GNPing 30 trillion a year. So we're now spending more than the gross GNP for the country. Mm-hmm. That is fine.
We've talked about it before. At best, we're looking at 50 to 60 years to pay back if we did not overspend. And oh, by the way, let's spend an extra $2 trillion this year alone. All they're doing is they're pushing a collapse down the road. Somebody like Schumer, who's 70 something, he doesn't care what happens 20 years from now.
IQ has nothing to do with this.
Say again?
His IQ has nothing to do with this conversation.
Fair point. They don't care. They push it far enough. They know they're not going to be in office. And,
right. There's an old story about retail, and I've had some friends in retail for years. When you take over a large department store, and a friend running Gimbals for a while, remember with eggs existed, but his answer to me was he deferred as much maintenance as possible so that it wouldn't come off his profit margin when he was making it, and he had to hope that the roof would last till the next guy came in. And they did minimal spending on what was necessary to keep the place running so everything would show up in profits. And this is exactly what you're seeing now.
Oh, absolutely.
They're going to spend as little as possible on what we need to get done, and they're going to slush fund everything else to make people happy. But people are not going to be happy soon. The money is it's going to run out. And going back, when you start looking at some of the base groups for the Democratic Party, and this is not only budget, but we were talking about in the previous segment. The Black community in New York City, for example, is up in arms about the illegal aliens.
Yeah, they are.
20 or 30 schools, and schools are being partially shut down. The gyms are being closed down, or whatever else, and they're having fits. Why? First of all, why is it in my school and not in the upper left side where the big schools expend are? And secondly, why are my kids being suffered for people that don't belong here? So this is what we call an unintended consequence, that they didn't think it would kick back, and this could really spread and make a real difference.
You're starting to see more and more of that too, Bill. Like, I don't know if you saw what happened out in Asheville. So Asheville's in the western part of North Carolina. It's about as liberal can be. So school board, they were talking about books in schools, right? You got to go find this. I'll send you the link off air. So this black pastor gets up in front of the school board and starts reading the book that the schools have in there, which is designed for 10-year-olds with graphics. And he showed the book to the school board. Graphical human anatomy, interacting, if I can put it that way, if you kind of catch my drift, because I don't want to get us banned. Pictures of it, and then he started reading the book to the school board, as left-leaning a school board as you'll ever see, and tore them apart. Why are you doing this to our children, right? Now, he was speaking in general, but he's also speaking on behalf of the Black community. They don't like this.
No, they don't.
And it was very interesting to see. And we talk about the Hispanics, and we've talked about this before. The Democratic Party's counting on them to vote for them. The Hispanics, they believe in God, they believe in marriage,
family,
all of that. The absolute antithesis of what the Democratic Party's pushing.
I'm big pro-abortionists.
I'm biting my tongue right now. It's interesting to see that wave starting. Now, is it going to be enough to affect things? I think it will be eventually. I mean, you talk about the black vote. If 5-10% of them switch, you'll be red an entire country.
And if you can do 5 or 10% of them from the black and the Hispanic vote, you've locked in a lot.
New York suddenly will flip red. California will flip red.
The Democratic Party become a minority party for a decade.
I would postulate for a century at that point, because you're talking generational change with that. Because the other thing that's happening too is, you talk about abortion, and I saw this. This will make you laugh. Is this guy who's not far right, but he's a little to the right. Let's just go with that. He's decided he's now in favor of abortion. You know why? Because who's going to get the abortions? Not the right, the left. Go ahead, get them all you want. We'll still have our babies. Who do you think's going to be in control in 20 years? Brilliant point. I mean, he's joking.
The other half of that joke is, and we will support gay marriage, because again, no children will come out of that either.
Yeah.
Yes. We can then eventually just have the majority by us having children. I've heard that.
And that's generational, right? If you change it, like right now they're saying it's conservatives have 1.2 babies to every one liberals have, which doesn't sound like a big difference, but it put that out by millions, because that's really what it is. Now you do the next generation after that, and the next, and you're going to see this country is going to be red shore to shore in probably 80 to 100 years, 3-4 generations.
Well, I'll be old by then.
You and I will be worm food by then.
I told you. But by the way, speaking of that, you gave me an opportunity to lead into some of the facts going on in North Carolina about the abortion battle we've been having here for the last week or so, where we've had the Democrats running around screaming, the Republicans are taking away your right to control your your own body, and they're banning abortions, and we need to do this. Well, the abortion bill was overridden today, or yesterday actually, and let me tell you the portions of the bill that sound so terrible. Uh, Anybody can have an abortion up to 12 weeks, which is the first trimester. That's 3 months in real simple numbers. So generally, you're pregnant, you got to do that. And if you're going to do that, you should be able to have your abortion in the first 12 weeks. They have made exceptions to go further. In the exception of rape or incest, you can now get to 20 weeks. Now, the next part says you can get to 24 weeks if there's something that limits the life of the child. Now, that could be something, if you wanted a child that's going to be crippled, say, very bad for the rest of life. And I don't advocate killing people that way, but some people would. Beyond that, if you have the health and welfare of the mother involved, there is no limit to when the abortion can take place. So that's inhumane
that's
policy.
a key point right there, Bill, because that's their main argument against it, right, is life of the mother.
Right. And now the life of the mother, if you can prove at the 7th or 8th month that mother's going to end up dying, then the abortion can be approved.
Looking at it, I haven't read the actual law, but I've read, reports on it, kind of similar to what you're talking about. And we've talked about this before, like what's the right number of weeks? Is it 12? Is it 15? Is it 20? Is it whatever? I'm reframing my thought process on this whole thing. I've kind of been in the middle. I kind of like all of this. I don't have a problem with anything that they've done with this. I honestly, if I'm being honest, you should know within 3 months if you're pregnant.
Contingencies as you reasonably could think of.
I think if you take the emotion out of it, if you take the religious aspect out of it, if you take the far left aspect out of it, you just sit down and calmly think it through. This is kind of where we can come to a consensus, I think. Because the majority of people, it's something like 2-to-1, roughly 2/3 of the public supports abortion in the first 3 months. That's this bill. People don't support it longer, like 38 weeks or 30 weeks. They don't support that. So, but they support it if the mother's life's in danger or whatever. It's almost like they just came together, came to the consensus. I have to give them credit where credit's due here. I like this bill on its whole. I could live with all of the aspects of it.
One part that's a little bit fuzzy to me, and I'm not really pleased with that, is the ability after 24 weeks if someone's got life limitations, because I'm not sure, exactly what that means. And, there are people who have led some sort of level with limitations. And does that mean a handicapping? Does that mean a mental issue? And, they may spell it out further, but I haven't got that data yet.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a tough one, right? Let's say it's Down syndrome, for example, right?
Yep.
Do we morally, ethically have the right to terminate that life at, say, I'll just use 25 weeks just to pick a number? I can see both sides of it. To be fair, do I agree? Would I terminate? No, I would not. I can state that. I would not want to terminate. But I've known people with Down children, and they are wonderful. But they're also a lot of work. So I understand that. I'm trying to be open-minded is where I'm going. And there's people going to jump on me for being that way. But you cannot come up with a definitive either way, I don't think. You can't say black or white. This is a gray issue. I see both sides of it. I can live with it the way it is. Now, yes, I do think it needs to be delineated a bit more.
And it may be, I just don't know that.
And I don't know either. I mean, I'd heard the same thing, but I took it as, and that's what I defaulted to, was somebody with, like, say, Downs, or, there are instances where they can do fetal tests and they know the baby's not going to live more than 2-3 years because of whatever disease they may have.
In that disease, they can figure out that upon birth, that child is going to live in nothing but pain for, whatever lifespan they have of that year or 2 or 3. And then I can see maybe that happening. But in general, I really think that this is a well thought out bill. And you compare it to South Carolina, which is actually kicking around the 6 weeks heart bill, which I think is much too soon.
I think it is too. I understand their position. I respect their position. They're entitled to have that position. I just don't agree with it. I think, like you said, 6 weeks is too soon. 12 weeks is 3 months. That's first term. If
And
you don't,
that's 2 to 3 periods for a woman.
you should know by then if you're pregnant or not, and that gives you adequate time to make a decision. It's not like 6 weeks. Let's say you find out at 5 weeks that you're pregnant, which is probably 4 or 5 weeks is probably where most women figure it out, right?
Agreed.
You might have a week to decide.
Yeah.
That's a little quick. Five,
And your first reaction might be you're just late.
agreed. So, I mean, all of that, I think it's a nice compromise. Is it a perfect thing? No, I'll say that. But how do you do any better? Would be my counter argument to that. Unless you go to the extremes either way, right? Which, again, we've talked about this many times. You can't take the extreme position either way in general. People can have that position, more than welcome to have that position. Whether you're, 100% pro-life or, as I like to put it, 100% pro-death, because that's basically what it is, right? Those are the extremes, and we need to, like we're trying to do with this show, come towards the middle a little bit more, have conversations about it. I actually am a wholehearted supporter of this bill. Now, if I'll throw an example, if they had said 15 weeks, I'd be feeling the exact same way.
But the good news is that this does take effect effective July 1st. So there's still even time to deal with, if you're in the middle there someplace. It does not start for July 1st, though it is now law of the land because of the override. And I will tell you the difference in both houses. If you listen to when the Senate passed the bill, it was filled with pro-lifers, and they pretty much cheered, which is an interesting reaction. And then they went to the lower house, which was filled with the leftist group, and they screamed out shame, 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 and it was unruly at that point. So
it was, I think the Senate had 30 votes, if I remember right. Pat voted for
30 to 20.
30 to 20, yeah. So, I mean, again, this is a contentious issue. If we could look at this bill objectively, and majority of people can sit back and look at it objectively, I think most people would agree this is a good step. Extremes on either side, like you said, the two groups that are protesting, you're not going to change their minds, and that's fine. But it kind of illustrates how things are kind of changing in the country. I think North Carolina, I think this will be a good conversation for us to have. I think it's becoming a test case for what the country could be, because it was going purple and starting, I would venture to say, starting to go a little on the blue side. That's now reversed. I think at this point it's not blood red, but it's red. I mean, you have like you said an hour ago, a Democratic governor, but he's powerless at this point. Powerless. It
matches. Now he's got two lessons. He's powerless and clueless.
How do you think he responds to this? Because he's got two options the way I see it. He can dig his heels in and say, I'm going to keep fighting you like he's been and losing over and over and over again. Or he can say, all right, I've got to come to the table and have a discussion.
Well, he and Josh Stein, who's the heir apparent to run for governor in 2024, they've already came out that they're going to fight this, and they're going to do their level best to reverse some of this if they can get the necessary votes in the General Assembly.
Well, I'm not just talking the abortion side. I'm talking about in general, Bill. Like, does this trigger them? Because you're right, Stein was quite vocal, but does this trigger them to say, you know what, maybe we can't take the extreme position, the two polar opposites that the country is at right now? Could this be a case where they wake up and go, look, if we could dig our heels in, just like Biden can do it with the House, or we got to come to the table and have a discussion. We may not agree on everything, but we can at least start with a discussion, because that's how you bring change.
I think that's going to come to play when we find out how the budget goes, because right now the budget is sitting in the Senate at the state level, and there's going to have to be a conference when they pass both budgets to come up with a solid one. to send to the governor. Now, the governor is going to have some decisions to make. They gave him what he's been asking for years, which is expanding Medicaid. And at the same token, they put a lot of issues into policy issues, which he's going to have to compromise. And if he wants what he wants, he's going to have to give on the other side. So I think the budget in the next 4 to 6 weeks is going to be the real test case to see what the rest of his term is going to look like.
I just think it's an interesting thing to look at because you look at Florida, it's both houses and the governor are Republican. Texas, same. You can't really use them as a litmus test. North Carolina is split, right? At presently, this could be like, all right, if I'm Cooper at this point, and I have a brain, go ahead. I'll let you get your shot in. Go ahead.
That's just too easy.
I know, but let's assume I have one. I've got to say, I've got two options here. I can continue what I'm doing, and he's going to just take loss after loss after loss after loss after loss. Or he can say, all right, I can save a little face. I can show a little humility, be a little humble, come to the table, but still fight. I'm not saying he can't fight for what he believes in. He should. All for it. But at least stop digging in on the extreme sides, And by the way, I would say the House and the Assembly, and the Senate, they would have to do the same. Let's come together. It's an opportunity. Whether it'll happen, I don't know.
I think you can, because I think in their minds right now, this is over the 2024 election. So therefore, they've got to do whatever they can to put the General Assembly in a bad light. So hopefully they can, at a minimum, take away the supermajority and win the governorship again. Or in a world that they live in, retake one or two houses of the government and the governorship. So I don't see that happening. I think they're going to fight everywhere they possibly can, because Josh Stein needs as much trouble out there as he can get with the Republicans and as much misinformation to help him win the governorship in 2024. And I don't think he's going to be successful, but
I see your point, and I can't disagree with you. I think they're going to go even more extreme. I think that's ultimately what they'll do. That's going to backfire on them, I think. If anything, because they did that in the last election, right? They started going further and further left, and now we have a supermajority.
Well, beyond that, what you got to remember is back when they started this whole mess, they owned the Supreme Court for the state.
Yes.
They don't anymore.
They don't anymore.
It's 5-2, and if everything goes right in 2024, it will be 6-1.
It just makes you wonder, at what point do they wake up? They're supposed to be woke. Clearly, they're not.
I'm not sure woke wakes up.
But and then again, we're talking North Carolina here. You could extrapolate that up to the federal government. The Democratic Party is going further and further and further left. And when they take a loss, they go even further left. At some point, somebody's got to have a brain. They're not stupid people. Go ahead. Get your shot in.
Well, I didn't say they were stupid, but they are ideologues, which means it doesn't matter if you win.
Fair point.
It doesn't matter what they're going to do, because there's no logic involved there. But you remember what's going to change things in 2024 is the state legislature now has been given back sole authority to redistrict.
Right. Exactly.
It's going to make it worse for the Democrats.
That's my point, right? Is if Cooper, Stein do the same thing they've been doing with the redistricting, like you said, the judges are going to be, it's 5-2 right now, it's going to be 6-1. It's a supermajority already. And by the way, New York does the same thing on the opposite. I always love how they throw out, oh, it's horrible that North Carolina has a supermajority. New York has one too. So why is that okay? But, anyway, I think I maybe call me foolish, call me an idealist, but I think somebody with some brains at some point has got to go, we can't keep doing what we're doing, because they're going to become a non-existent. The Whig Party will have more power than they will.
Well, the only thing I can see happening is if maybe more moderate Democrats or who became unaffiliated may start to reinvest in their own party over there and try to rebuild it more towards center left rather than extreme left. So but that's going to take kicking out most of these extremists and replacing them with people who may not believe 100% where the other side's coming from, but they're willing to sit and talk and compromise.
That's a large part of them. It's the extremists are a very small group. We've talked about this before too. 10, 15, tops 20% of that party. But
they've driven so many of them into unaffiliated. They manage the party.
Yeah, they're in control right now. But
if you look at North Carolina, the largest voting bloc in our state is unaffiliated. The second largest is Democrat, and the third is Republican. Now, the counties are different in many other areas, but you're talking about Republicans down to the Democrats by about 300,000 votes, and all of them down to the largest group is still the unaffiliated now. So, but they lean generally to the one Republican.
And they're also concentrated basically in Charlotte and Raleigh, those areas. So North Carolina is becoming
not in our area, but we're trying.
Yeah, we're
trying to get buses to run.
Yeah, we have one small slice of pizza, as I call it, down here in southeastern North Carolina that needs to change. But that's a topic for another day, Bill. My friend, we are at 90 minutes.
I've got one more quick thing to throw out there.
Let's do it.
Okay. I don't know if anybody heard this, but we know that the military has gone through this diversity and inclusion and equity operation that no one likes this wokeness that's being forced on the military. Well, no one's discussing it, but 161 former generals and admirals have signed a letter to DOD and to Congress asking Congress to defund the inclusion and equity and divisiveness and take it out of the budget for the military and go back to where things were. So more power to those generals for stepping up and doing what they needed to do.
Amen to that. I mean, just out of curiosity, do you know what the budget number is?
No, I don't. I don't have a clue for that.
Maybe they could spend it to replace all the ammunition we've sent over to Ukraine. I'm just saying.
Either that, or they can use it to unload plugs out to the electric military. 2030.
Yeah, we covered that story last week. Yeah. The electric Humvees. That's going to need one hell of a long extension cord.
Either that, or you're going to have massive ever-ready battery trucks following you because.
Which will have to run on gasoline because they're. Never mind. I'm going to shut up.
We're going to wrap this up. I think we've done enough tonight.
I think we skated a lot. So, well, let's go ahead and wrap up the show, Bill. So, a couple things that I just want to mention to the audience is we are up on TikTok. So, we're doing a daily post, which is mostly the old guy that you're looking at. I will be chiming in with mine shortly, but he's put up some good ones. So I've kept my mouth shut because, well, he's done such a great job, and I will do better, but I want to let him have his moment in the sun. So
the thing is, he has a trouble arguing me when I'm right, which is usually most of it.
Actually, they've been fantastic. And they're also up on YouTube Shorts. So if you're watching us on YouTube, you can go check out on the shorts on that. Yep, I was going to say he's got the hat. Yep.
We're going to do some more later, so hang on there.
Cool. Also, we're up on Spotify, so check us out there. And it's both video and audio on Spotify, so you can watch us there. And comment, guys. I had a comment this week from somebody, Bill's brother, which I thought was fantastic. So shout out to Larry. Am I right, Larry?
Yeah, that's his name.
Yeah, I loved his comment. I love reading the comments. I know Bill does too. We want to hear what you guys think. And, you
might want to go.
Say again?
Suggestions where we might want to go with.
Oh, they're going to tell us where to go, some of them, Bill. Don't worry. But yeah, chime in on the conversation. Let's have a conversation about things, and we'll talk about them on the show. Even if we don't agree with each other, let's have the conversation, because that's really the objective with it.
If you don't agree with this, we will defend to the death your right to be wrong.
You say that every week. You know, you need a different phrase than that one because that. I mean, I agree with it. Don't get me wrong, but and hey, if you've watched this far, you got to like it and share it and subscribe and the same things we tell you every week. Just do it because it
And
helps
we'll
us.
come back soon.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add before we close things down, Bill?
Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.
And next week we should be back to our normal format. We didn't mention earlier. Greta wasn't available this week, so we did it online. But we'll be back to our normal format with our awesome producer, Greta. Greta, we miss you. And
Wait a minute, we forgot Henry,
oh, the dude. The
the
dude.
star of the show.
The
We're just
king. King Henry. So, yes. So, but they'll be back next week. And until next time, let's sign off and say, have a great week, everybody.
enjoy it, everybody. See you soon.